Hohenstern, one of our faithful captains, just does a great job, our team. But a lot of work. And I want to speak to you just a little bit about that subject tonight of the bus ministry and children's ministry in general, but the bus ministry. My father used to say all the time, the bus ministry is kind of the Marine Corps of all the other ministries because of the difficult nature of it. I would lie to you if I told you that every Wednesday night went off without a hitch. We've had all kind of issues over the years. In fact, one of the reasons that we do a little bit different and run a Wednesday night program, some of you may not know this story. If you know it, then you just bear with me, I'll tell it. But years ago in Texas, we had a big day on our buses. Sunday morning, we were in buses like everybody else. And Sunday morning, so you have, at that time, we were probably running 5 buses. So I probably had 200 or 300 kids that day. And we had a big day. And I was, of course, pastoring the church. Now, I still drove a bus a good bit back in those days. But I walked out of church, and we had, of course, the drive-in crowd, everything. And the buses were out down on the other end of the property. They were loading up. And I saw complete chaos. I'm talking craziness. And workers were scrambling and kids were flying. And a terrible fight had broken out between 2 girls. In all my years of bus ministry, the best fights have been the girl fights, all right? I'm not kidding about that. It was a knockdown, drag-out, hair-pulling, just crazy fight. And so I immediately run down, and I remember Valerie was involved, and the other folks were involved, and we were trying to separate these 2 girls. And once you get a handful of hair, it is tough to separate that. And they were going at it. Finally, we got them separated. And I said, Valerie, you and 2 or 3 workers take our van and take this child home, and let's go straight to her home. And you guys take this child and go home, and we'll get everybody else on the bus. And about that time, we had escorted the girl several hundred feet away going toward the van. The other girl broke loose and started running toward her. And I'll never forget this. She's running toward the girl behind me, and they're chasing her. And I'm here, and she ran down, she stepped, and I just stuck my arm out like a clothesline, literally what it was. And I caught her around the neck there and just kind of brought her into my chest and held her. And then we got her home, and we got the kids home. And by then, that may have been the day the police came. I don't know. They came a couple times, but that's another story. But I remember thinking, we got to do something different, because this is Sunday morning. All of our drive-in crowd has just seen this chaos, and little Johnny's going to go home and talk about how, this chaos had gone on. And I thought, my goodness. And so I went to lunch, and my wife and I went to lunch, and at that time, one of our assistant pastors, and I said, we have 3 options, and here's the 3 options. We're going to make a decision right now, today. We were at a Mexican restaurant in Groves, Texas. And I said, we're going to stop the bus ministry as of today immediately and never pick up another boy, because the liability and all the issues and hurting the church and everything. I said, well, we're going to do that. I said, 2, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, and we're going to have some kind of major trouble. Or 3, we got to come up with a better plan. And from that day forward, we began to think about different things for several years. We did a Saturday program, and then we settled on a Wednesday night program. And the reason we settled on a Wednesday night program was we were doing Saturday. We called it Saturday Super Church. We were running the buses on Saturday morning, and then we just have regular church on Sunday. And we had Vacation Bible School, and I drove the route, had 80-something kids packed into a bus for Vacation Bible School. Every night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, we had 400 or 500 kids for VBS. It was packed out. We had a blast. I thought to myself, man, Saturday will be awesome, because we've had all these kids all week, and we're going to have, these kids are going to come, and we had 80 kids Friday night. Saturday morning, we pick them up for Saturday Super Church, and we had 20. And I got to thinking, what in the world is going on? Well, mom and dad are not going to get up on Saturday morning. Mom and dad are not going to get up on Sunday morning. Mom and dad are not going to change vacation plans, beach plans, all those plans, football, basketball, all those things. On Saturday and Sunday, they've got a lot going on. But on the nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're all out in the neighborhood. They're all playing. Mom and dad are awake. Mom and dad, many of them are sober for the first time all day. I'm not being funny about that. That's just the way it is. And I thought, here's the problem. We're picking up kids when they're not ready, and when mom and dad are not going to get them up to get ready, why not pick them up when they're outside looking for somewhere to go, and mom and dad are willing to let them go for a couple hours in the middle of the week? And so that's when we changed to WOW, worship on Wednesday. And of course now they call it Bus Stop, which is Student Transportation Outreach Program. But we start on Wednesday night, and we do it because that's when kids are dressed, that's when kids are outside, that's when mom and dad are able to at least give permission for the kids to come. There's a lot of reasons. They're not at the alternate parent's house every other weekend. We're not competing against activities and all that. And I promise you, the only reason we don't run just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids on Wednesday night is because of workers and space. That's the only reason. If you'll leave your house on the way to church at 6 o'clock in the evening and just drive by your neighborhood, you'll see kids everywhere. And on Sunday morning when you leave your house at 9 o'clock on your way to church, you'll see kids nowhere. And so this is a great opportunity to reach boys and girls. Mom and dad don't care. Mom and dad are not engaged. Many of them, some are, but many of them are not engaged spiritually, but they don't mind you helping their kids spiritually. And so we keep doing the buses. Now, it's changed. Some of you old timers remember if you could if you were of age, you could drive a bus and were halfway sober, we'd put you behind the wheel of a bus. And we'd send you out and pick you up. Now we have to have CDLs, and we have to have all kind of insurances and the price of gas and all these things. We didn't get in the bus ministry because it was cheap, and we're not getting out of the bus ministry because it costs more money. But we do have to be wise, and we have to be strategic about it. But this is a great, great ministry, and I appreciate those that work in it. And I would still drive. I still do every now and then, obviously. But it's just a little harder than it used to be to change gears, run in here, preach, then get back on the bus. But I do enjoy it, and I appreciate so much those that get involved. Now, I'm going to cut the sermon probably in a half tonight, at least half. I was going to preach to you out of Mark chapter 10, so if you want to find your place there, you can. Mark chapter 10, and choose the heart of working with children. By the way, if you haven't met Brooklyn, she's here tonight. This is beautiful. Brooklyn Farley, and I got to hold her this afternoon and love on her. And with all new babies now, the rule is what? Look, don't touch, okay? But I went over today and got to spend some time with the Farleys. She is absolutely perfect, y'all. I mean, she's not my granddaughter, but she's close, okay? And got the best dimple. Got a dimple that you would not believe right there. Just gorgeous. And just the cute little toes and fingers, and just so proud of Jenny. She's doing great, by the way. And Chad is whipped like you ain't never seen in your life. She conquered Chad in about 15 seconds, okay? And so it's just a blessing to see little Brooklyn. And you pray for Jenny and Chad and the boys. That's a wild bunch right there, okay? And this little baby girl is going to balance everything else. Chad thinks those three boys are crazy. He ain't raised one girl yet. Now, I'm going to just tell you, that's what I learned. One girl equals all the boys you got. You have never seen, how many of you raised teenage daughters? Can you explain to me what goes on in the mind of a teenage girl? 1 minute, you're on the mountain. The next minute, you're in the valley. And then you're back on the mountain. And there's nothing changed except that person's mind. Now, I've got Madeline, of course, it's 21. And then that other little child, what's her name, Maya. I can't even imagine where we're going with her. If you haven't met Maya yet, this week, she got her ears pierced. So that's the topic of conversation right now, is she got her ears pierced. Now, Mark 10, and we'll get there next week. So hold your place there. You know the passage I'm going to speak to in verses 13 through 16, where Jesus rebukes the disciples and talks about suffering those little children to come unto him. But I want to set the table tonight just because what we've just seen, and I want to give you some things from the book of Proverbs. So if you want to just write these verses down or try to follow along, I'm going to give you 5 or 6 Proverbs tonight. Proverbs chapter number 1, the Bible says in verse number 8, listen to it, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." All right, so what's what's the admonition here? It's to hear instruction and to forsake not the law. Proverbs chapter 2, verse number 1. The Bible says, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse number 1. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. Proverbs chapter 4 and verse number 1. Hear ye children, the instruction of a father, and attend to know understanding. Proverbs chapter 4 verse 10. O my son, hear, O my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of my life, of thy life shall be many. Verse 20 of chapter 4, my son, attend to my words, incline thine ears to my sayings. Proverbs chapter 5, verse 1, my son, attend unto my wisdom, bow thine ear to my understanding. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 20, my son, keep thy father's commandment, forsake not the law of thy mother. And then Proverbs chapter 7, verse number 1, my son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live, and my law as the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Now, in Proverbs, you have commandments, instruction, law, wisdom, words, understanding, sayings. You have all of these different words that are describing wisdom, instruction, teaching, how to live life. Now, in the South, we'd say this is home training. These are the things you're learning from your mother and from your father. How to conduct yourself, how to live, how to behave. All the principles in life that you'll need. Now, let me ask you a question. And you just saw a couple hundred kids come up on the platform. Let me ask you a question. What are they learning? What are they learning? What you learned at the foot of your mother or your father, what you learned from a Sunday school teacher, what you learned from a pastor, what you learned from someone that invested in your life, where are they going to learn that from? If mom and dad are not spiritually interested, if mom and dad are not saved, if mom and dad are not taking them to church, if mom and dad are not teaching them, not all of our kids come from dysfunctional homes, but the majority, the vast majority of them do. What are they learning? What is their moral code? Why do they act the way they do? You say, man, they couldn't even sit still for 5 minutes. Why? If you think about what you and I see on TV that we protect our children from, who's protecting them? If you think about an education system that is very, very much not concerned with education, but far more concerned with indoctrination, who's protecting them? If you think about music. I watched a black preacher today on TV, and he was talking about, he's 62 years old. He said, I remember the black community before hip-hop. He said, before hip-hop, and he was talking to a black church, black community, and he said, I remember in the black community, we should respect our women. We didn't talk down about our women. We didn't call them, and he used words and names. He said we didn't talk about, and he said different things. He said something's happened in the last 40 or 50 years. And if we would say, hey, that's bad, who's saying that's bad here? My question is, where would any of these kids, or where are these kids going to be? And the majority will still be there, because you think about without a home, without a mom and dad, how difficult life would be. I'm telling you, and I'm explaining to you, that Wednesday night at community is probably, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying probably, it is the only time that they're hearing any kind of truth at all. Because if you think, I think about our home, we are constantly saying, you can't watch that, Maya. You can't watch that. You turn that off. Get off of YouTube. Get off of that cartoon. We don't like that message of that cartoon. Cartoons, movies. If you're not guarding your kids, they would hear so much more. And you think, man, I have a full-time job just keeping bad information out, much less putting good information in. Now, where would a child who's a product of a dysfunctional, broken home, where would a child goes to a public indoctrination system, where would a child whose media is limitless, who has access to things that you and I would never have imagined at that age, and they have unfiltered access. There's no protection, the ratings of PG or R. There's nobody saying anything. Everything in the world is just being poured into them. And then we wonder why our society and why our children, why we're in such a bad situation. It's because they are hearing and seeing and taking part in at ages now. Just talking about how difficult bus ministry is, and this is just the way it is. Last Wednesday night, we had a fourth grader caught smoking pot on our campus. Fourth grader. Now, that was a joyous ride home. They were very calm, but I mean, other than that, it was, chill. They were chill. I walked in the Jabez Center after church, and the doors were open in the bathroom, and they were all standing around like, what's going on? I said, don't you smell that? And I'm like, what is that, a skunk? And they said, not a skunk. It ain't a skunk. Fourth grader. I'm telling you, in fourth grade, I hadn't learned what marijuana was yet, Not much less partake of it. Vapes now and all these other things. So I'm just saying, you need to understand this is not just some ministry that our church doesn't have anything better to do. In fact, we spent the last 3 days as a staff just talking about our schedule and about how busy a church we are and all the things we're trying to do. Some of the things we're going to talk about Sunday evening, by the way. And let me remind you, Ministry Appreciation Night, I'm excited about this night. It's going to be a great night. But we don't do this because we don't have anything else to do. And we don't do this because, we just want to get a big number on Wednesday. I could care less about the number. That's one reason that we stopped on Sunday morning. I didn't want it to, I wanted our church to be our church, and I wanted the bus ministry to be a tool, an evangelistic outreach of our church. Our numbers are not the main thing. It doesn't matter if we have 400 or 700. I could care less. So why do we do this? We do this because if our church and CEF and other ministries that reach into the lives of these kids, if we don't do this, I want you to give me an honest answer. Where would they hear truth? Because they're not going to hear it in the music they listen to. And they're not going to hear it in the indoctrination of their teachers who are trying their best. I just read an article, not an article, but a news report of a mother, and Monroe, maybe Google this to make sure I'm doing it right, but a mother that is trying to castrate her son without the father's permission. And I think again, the number was fourth grade. I'm not exactly sure. Fourth grade, castrate. Chemically castrate a boy without the father is trying to stop it, and there's a lawsuit right now. Did y'all see? Am I the only one that saw that? So if you're being told, let me tell you this. The other day we had, y'all saw that beautiful little baby up here. That's the best bus kid out there, by the way, that Annabelle was holding. But the other day we were driving down the road, and he was crying. He was fussing. And Valerie had to stop. And I was driving. She had to stop and crawl over and get in the back seat and try to comfort him. And all of a sudden he got quiet. And he just stopped crying and fussing. And she wasn't talking to him. She wasn't saying to him. I said, Valerie, what'd you do? She said, I gave him a Barbie doll. Oh, my goodness. My 8-month-old grandson's playing with Barbie dolls. Maybe he's questioning. Now, watch. Now watch. How stupid an argument is that? He doesn't even know what a Barbie doll. And most of these 5th, 6th, 7th graders, they don't have the mental capacity to make decisions. And yet we live in a society that will not let mom and dad know about an abortion, but will keep from mom and dad as they try to groom someone into a sexual transition. So I'm just saying, bus ministry is nothing more than a frontline ministry trying to do anything we can. People say, well, you try to entice kids to come. 100%. 100%. If a piece of gum, now that's a long time ago that a piece of gum would work. But if a campaign or a piece of gum or something will get a kid to church and they could hear truth, just like tonight, this little girl got saved at CEF and came here. Little girl got saved reading her Bible. Little girl been coming for years. Listen, if that means that we have to do all we can, then I feel like our church must do something to at least say there's a God. When Tyler was our bus pastor 12, 13 years ago, he asked a great group of the young people, do you know who Adam is? 2 out of 100 kids said Adam was the first man in the Bible. The other 98 or whatever the number was, the other rest of that whole crowd had never heard, we're talking about St. Petersburg, Florida, had never heard of a biblical Adam, a creation story. Nowadays, we don't start with the gospel. We start with in the beginning, God. And it may take 3 or 4 or 5 years. We may not have that much time. We try to give the gospel as quickly as possible, as often as possible. But we have to explain there's a God to begin with. These kids don't have any concept. In the days that many of you, and some of us are older, and I appreciate that, but we at least grew up in a foundation that recognized a God. Now, you may not have claimed to be a Christian, but you recognize a final or higher authority. They have no concept of this stuff. So I want to give you just tonight, just by way of introduction, 10 things, and again, just introduction, 10 things that we must teach our children. Number one, we must teach them to fear God. We must teach them to fear God. You say, Brother Brent, what if we don't teach them to fear God? If we fail to teach our children to fear God, then the devil will teach them to reject and hate him. Now, here's the deal. Fear is not fear in the sense of I'm scared to death. That's why that song tonight was kind of interesting. Some of these kids have this idea that God hates them. Why? Because of the abuse, the abandonment, the things they've gone through. We're not talking about fear God as they would fear a drunken father or an abusive family member. We're talking about fear in that there is a creator God who's so awesome and so powerful and so big that he created them in his image and for purpose and reason. We don't want them to hate God. We want them to fear him, to know him. The fear of the Lord is what? The beginning of wisdom. That's where it all starts, is that there is a God. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. On Friday night at the men's advance, they started the whole men's advance preaching a message on the fact that in the beginning, God created us, and he did it with purpose and reason. When you understand how big God is and how awesome God is, and that God designed you perfectly and flawlessly and wonderfully and wants a relationship with you through Christ. And so we teach them to fear God. If not, the devil will teach them to reject and hate God. Number two, we must teach them to guard their minds. To guard their minds. If we fail to teach children to guard their minds, the devil will gladly give them an open mind. Where every man does that which is right in his own eyes. Where everybody's right and there is no wrong. Our college campuses today full of ignorant young people who are so open-minded, they're idiotic in their inability to reason and think. They can't handle they can't handle an argument that is not theirs, so they must have safe spaces. If you're needing a safe space, you're not ready for college. where you're supposed to discuss and debate, but we must teach them to guard their mind, because if not, the devil will fill it with all kind of foolishness. Number one, fear God. Number two, guard their mind. Number three, obey their parents. Teach them to obey their parents. If we fail to teach children to obey their parents' authority, the devil will teach them to rebel, to break your heart. Now watch this. We're not their parents, but we are some of the only authority that will hold them accountable. They don't act like idiots in our classes. We dismiss them. We send them home. And I'd rather send one child. I hate sending any child home, but I'd rather send one child home that 20 will be able to listen. And so we teach consequence and action, and we show them, no, this is right. We've had kids, I've had kids say to me, ain't nobody going to tell me what to do. I mean, just a fifth grader just cuss me, and I mean, just crazy, because there is no respect for authority in any way. And so we teach authority and respect and rules and understanding. Come on. Number four, we teach them to select their companions carefully. Select their companions carefully. Why? Because if we do not teach them to select their companions carefully, the devil will gladly choose their companions for them. That's the biggest one. We had on the bus I drove with Sue, we had a little girl that had been coming for years and years and years and years and years. Sweet little girl. And all through little elementary school up, and she got in junior high. And all of a sudden, two girls got on the bus with her that she started meeting in the junior high school. And I'm telling you, this sweet little girl attitude changed overnight. And she became just angry, and her dress changed, her attitude. And pretty soon we had to kick all three of them off the bus. You say, what happened? Just the wrong crowd. And you know that. You are now, you soon will be, whatever your friends are. You show me who you're running with, I'll show you who you are. And so when we tell our kids, man, you've got to choose kids. That's why it's so important that they have the Angelicas, and they have the Sunnies, and they have the girls that can be role models, and say, hey, you don't have to have the wrong friends. You don't have to have friends that do all these things and get involved in all these things. Choose the right friends. And that's such a huge part. I could spend the whole night just talking about the danger of those that we choose. Number five, we teach them to control their body. To control their body. If we fail to teach children to control their bodies, the devil will teach them to give their bodies over to anyone and to everyone for anything. And some of these kids are so desperate for attention. They deal with abandonment issues. They deal with abuse issues. They deal with all kind of post-traumatic stress stuff, that the body is the one thing that they have that they can give. And so we tell them, look, your body is precious, and you're precious. You are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and you ought to treat your body with respect, and you don't have to be like this, or you don't have to do these things, because so many of them, it's normal. It's not normal. I read an article the other day, stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. Stupidest woman bragging about how many sexual partners she had, and I'm just thinking to myself, what kind of life is that going to be down the road when the mental anguish of the guilt of your sin just lives with you and lives with you and lives with you? And that sin is one sin that doesn't just affect you now, but affects you forever and in every relationship to follow. Every relationship to follow. Number six, if we fail to teach our children to number six, we have to do a better job of this. We fail at this. Number six, we must teach our children the joy of marriage and to enjoy their spouse. We must make much of marriage. If we don't make much of marriage and purity before marriage, then what we tell our children is that if we fail to teach them to enjoy the marriage partner given them by God, the devil will teach them to destroy their marriage with and I can't even begin to talk about this hardly, with unfaithfulness and adultery, pornography, and all these other things that go into that. Marriage is the best thing. It's the first institution God created. Sex is awesome in marriage. But like everything else, Satan has perverted what God made perfect. And so we need to build up the beauty of marriage and the beauty of sex in marriage. We tell our, Brother Rosser said this the other night at the men's conference. We tell our kids, no, 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 no. And then we get married and say, yes. We need to tell them why the no. Explain the no. That this is a great yes, but in its place, in its time. Some of you, your marriage is so critical because you're setting foundation for your children and for your children's children. And we must make much of marriage. Marriage is God's divine institution. Before the church, before government, before anything else, it was a man and a wife. God said, this is good. This is good. This is completeness, wholeness, togetherness. Right? And so we must make much of marriage. That's why this marriage retreat and preaching on marriage and the home and relationships and so many things that we as parents and as influencers need to make much of marriage. Number 7, teach our children to watch their words. If we fail to teach our children to watch their words, the devil will fill their mouth with gossip, slander, lies, and language. Watch your words. People judge you on your words. People judge you on how you speak. How you speak. What you say and how you say it. And so we must teach them that words matter in a day that, again, we go back to the music they're poured into. You don't call people those names. This is not acceptable. The other day, one of our kids did something, and I won't tell you who, but it's not the girl. It said something, and so my wife reverted back to old school mom 101. Got that soap. You'd have thought that we had done something. I mean, like, whoo! How many of you ever had soap in your mouth? Yeah. How many of you needed to have more soap in your mouth? Amen, right? Yeah. But words matter. And listen, what's cute in a little toddler is not cute in a teenager. And if you don't deal with it when a teenager, when they become a toddler, it's too late. I mean, when they become a teenager, it's too late. Deal with a toddler. I remember having a child, and when he was little bitty, I was at a church service, and a little child was doing something, and I thought, man, they need to get a control of that because that may be tolerated now, but that's going to be terrible down the road. Watch your mouth. You don't speak to adults that way. I'm from the South. I'm an old man. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. That's still the way it is. And you go, oh, don't call me ma'am. Ma'am, if I don't call you ma'am, my grandma will come back from the grave and get me. All right? Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. And I don't care who you are. Treat with respect. Treat your ladies with respect. Treat your men with respect. I wouldn't talk to a dog the way some of our young people talk to their moms and their dads. Okay? And so we must teach them to watch their words. Number 8, we must teach them to work. We must teach them to work. Number 8, if we do not teach them to work, then our children will be lazy. And they'll live in a impoverished society. They will live in a society where they expect others to work for them. Listen, God designed you and I to work. Even before the garden had a curse, man had a job. He was to tend that and keep that. Why? Because work is part of our DNA. It gives you a mental, there's something about work that gives you a mental boost. You've accomplished something. You've done something. There's a self-worth in work. Plus, if a man doesn't work, then the Bible's very clear about that. That man ought not eat. I'm not against helping people, but I am against enabling people. Every man that can, should. Every woman that can, should work. And we teach that at home. Kids ought to clean their room. Our kids at this point, and this has been our kids the whole way through. Hey, Brother Bill, stop clicking that pen for me. Thank you. The first hour and a half, I was fine. The last hour and a half is driving me crazy. I thought he was clipping his fingernails. At first I said, he's only got 10 of them, and it kept going. So it wasn't the fingernails, it was the pen. But our kids, listen, Hudson, special needs, makes his own lunch every night. Maya, 9 years old, makes her own lunch. Now we supervise. You say, well, man, I can't believe that. Your 17-year-old can make a lunch if Hudson can. Your 17-year-old can make their bed if Maya can. Now, we have to remind her, and we have to encourage and teach and train, but I'm not going to go behind and pick up a 9-year-old. I'm way too old for that. Okay? Teach them responsibility. Teach them to work. Teach them that it is part of what God's called us to do. We're going to work, or we're going to be a servant to someone who does work. All right, number 9, if we are not careful, we'll not teach our children to manage their money. Manage their money. One of the things that I've really been encouraged about in our school is we've changed some of our philosophy about math. And math, we've changed it to more of a money management because we've not taught our kids. I've never used the pie theory one time in my life, but I have tried to balance a checkbook or two. All right. Number 9, if we fail to teach our children to manage their money properly, they will spend carelessly and live in debt. I hate with a passion Scott. Now, if you work for them, God bless you, whatever. But I hate any of these places that keep poor people poor. Because what they're doing, they're by the way, when you want to study your Bible and find out what God thinks about those that take advantage of the poor, you'll be amazed how many verses deal with taking advantage of the poor. Places like that, enormous interest rates, unreasonable terms, credit card. You get into credit card debt, you'll never pay off 27, 28% credit. You'll never live long enough to pay that off until you do something different. Okay? And so we must teach them credit cards and these payday loans and pawn shops and all of this. That's not how you need to live. You need to live with your income more than your outgo. And actually it's something called savings and retirement and all those kind of things. Those are principles. By the way, we need to do that at home, and we're going to do that here at our Christian school. And as much as we can, if the Lord will allow us to, if these kids will allow us influence, we'll take those that want extra and can do more. We'll do our best to do that. We don't have the time on Wednesday night. We're gospel-centered. We're basic. But some of these kids that Angelica's been working with, she's been working with for years, and twice a year she'll pull a group aside and do more than just the Wednesday night program because we're trying to pour into them principles that thankfully many of us learn at home or at church or at school, but they're not learning if we're not careful. Number 10, finally, teach our children to love their neighbors. Teach our children to love their neighbors. If we don't teach our children to love our neighbors, the devil will gladly teach them to love only themselves and to hate others. It's a basketball player, I think it was Cantor, if I'm not mistaken, he's Turkish. So he came to America, and he'd never been around anybody but Muslim people. And he found out that when he got on his basketball team, when he came to America, that a couple of his teammates were Christians. And he just freaked out automatically because, raised in the Middle East where he was raised. They were the enemy. And he said, they went up to him and they said, hey, man, let us take you to show you where the mosques are and let us show you where some of the restaurants that you'd like the food. And he said, I couldn't believe that they were kind to me. And then he said, I met a Jewish girl, and she invited me over to her home. And he said, man, I called a friend of mine. I said, if I'm not back in 2 hours, this is the address I'm at. They've killed me. He said, I had the most wonderful evening. The food was great. The music was great. He said, it was just so wonderful. He said, I found something out. My whole life, I'd been raised to hate Christians, American, and Jews. He said, I found out that they were the kindest, sweetest. He said, man, I've learned so much being in America. If we don't teach our kids to love our neighbor regardless of circumstance or situation, culture or color, background, diversity, God is interested in diversity and respects no person. And so it doesn't matter if the kids are red, yellow, black, white, pink, blue, questioning, confused. It doesn't matter. We want them to love their neighbor. Why? Because Christ loved us. Amen. So this is one of the reasons that we do what we do on Wednesday night. We do our best to give them. You said, man, we can't do all that in just an hour or so. You're right. Sometimes we get these kids one night. And so we want to try to tell them as much as we can, God loves you, and this place loves you. And maybe down the road somewhere when life really begins to go hard and it goes difficult, I wonder, does anybody care? They'll remember that church. What was that church? What was that old man that drove the bus? Baptist church. And it may not be our church. It may not be in our neighborhood. It may not be in our state. But they'll remember that somebody told them that Jesus loved them. And one of these little psalms they've memorized or one of these verses they've memorized will trigger something. And we may be a seed plant that may not give fruit till years and years down the road. Or maybe we'll see some of them come to Christ and grow. And we've seen a lot of them come to our Christian school. We've seen a lot of them go on to do great things for the Lord. But the bottom line, years ago, I was in Texas, and I had a guy come to the office in the middle of the week. Good-looking dude, big, tall, black guy, just sharp, big guy. And he said, man, do y'all still run buses? And I said, oh, yeah. I said, we still run buses. He said, 25 years ago, 20-something years ago, he said, y'all had a motorcycle guy come and jump all the buses in the parking lot. And he said, I came to that and started riding the bus, me and my brother. And he said, I want to tell whoever's still doing buses that you may not think we're listening, but I was listening. He said, sir, he said, I'm married now. He said, I have a great career. He said, I'm a deacon at a church over in Houston. And I just want to tell you that I was listening all those years ago. Now, I'm going to tell you we're going to get to heaven, and I can't wait for my mom and dad to get to heaven. Well, don't tell my mom that. Let's give her another week or two maybe, But I can't wait for my mom and dad and all those bus workers of my childhood, Billy Beatonball and Pat, Opal Huckabee, Rich Tutowski, Bill King, Joe and Sandy Bagley, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of others. I can't wait for them to get to heaven. And these little boys and girls, now I don't know what they'll look like in heaven. They're going to come run up. If you know who my daddy is, you call him Dr. Stancil or Mr. Stancil. If you knew who he was back then, you'd say Mr. Johnny. That's what all the kids, Miss Brenda and Mr. Johnny. And they'll start screaming, Mr. Johnny, Mr. Johnny, Mr. Johnny. Miss Brenda, Miss Brenda, Miss Brenda. And sometimes I'm thinking, why do we do what we do? And I'm reminded tonight, because maybe we make a difference. And it may not be in all of them, but maybe there's some that are listening. And say, I'm going to follow Christ. There's a better way for me. Christ has a better plan for me. And I don't have to live like this old world says I have to live, and I don't have to give my body like the world says I have to give my body. I can live for Christ. Pray for our bus workers. Pray for our Christian school. Pray for our child care. We just had several new families come in our child care, and one of the girls that brought her, this is how old you get, it's just crazy. One of the girls that brought her little boy to the child care was a little teenage girl that my son used to work with at Chick-fil-A years ago over Tyrone, and now she's married and got 2 little kids. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Making a difference in the lives of children. I would rather try to reach them as children than try to save them as broken men or women. Let's pray for our bus workers, pray for our ministry, and let's be more vigilant about being intentional with our bus kids and our bus ministry. Father, tonight I pray you bless. Thank you for